pointed at his chest and killed him. How does that? How is that equal? It's not equal. It's
Loop. So good afternoon, good morning rather. Welcome to WJUC. My name is Robert Smith. I am the director of the African American Legacy Project. This is the second week for a program on violence. We had a number of guests last week, and last week we talked about this fear sense of urgency, and we tried to unravel exactly what the problems that got us to this point. This week we want to try to unpack and look at the things that we are intending to do, our community can do to make things better. Just to remind everyone, you can view this program on WJUC's Facebook program, where you can comment and or submit questions. What we like to do at this particular moment is simply ask everyone in the audience to do us a favor, just like we did last week. We'd like for you to simply pick up the phone, call someone, and invite them to join us here on this radio station, this program. Before we do anything else, we'd like to begin this program as we always do. He is the author of the Community Conversations. He's the president of the Untitled Chapter of the NAACP, and he's also the pastor of Jerusalem Baptist Church. So, Pastor Perryman, we
recording in progress.
Lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. A charge to keep I have, a God to glorify, a never dying soul to save, and fitted for the sky. To serve this present age, my calling to fulfill. Oh, may it all my powers engage to do my master's will. Arm me with jealous care, as in thy sight to live. And oh, thy servant, Lord, prepare a strict account to give. Help me to watch and pray, and on thyself rely. Assured if I must trust betray, I shall forever die. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Perryman. We will come back to you at the end of the program to get your concluding thoughts to wrap this. But we'd like to take this moment very quickly to talk to WJUC and thank them for their willingness to use this platform to reach out into the community. General Manager Rich Hogan joins us now. Mr. Hogan, can you just briefly summarize, tell us why WJUC chose to get involved in this project at such a high level? Mr. Hogan? Mr. Hogan, you muted? He's not there. What we'll do is we'll continue and we'll come back to Mr. Hogan once we figure out what that problem is, technology. One thing, there he is. Rich, you want to tell us why you guys got into this?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Smith. One of the reasons is we feel here at the Juice that this summit, the conversation is necessary, and to be able to use our station as a platform to bring this conversation so that people can discuss it and talk about it. And that's one of the main importance of Black media in the community. And that was one of the main reasons why our the person who started this station, Charlie Chuck, back in '97, he felt it was important for the community to have a voice, have their own voice. And so that's what we're doing. We're giving the community a voice. And so we want to use this platform to make change. And so this is important. So that's one of the reasons why we do it.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to keep moving. I'd like to go around the horn and introduce the panel. Ms. Shay Banks, then is a licensed social worker, and she's worked with the team of Whittington and Associates. Dr. Laurent Myrick is Executive Director of Juvenile Corrections Facility in Rhode Island. Everybody in Toledo knows Dr. Ramos Durant. As he points out, he's purple and gold on the east side of the river, but he's also the superintendent of Toledo Public Schools. And he has, and he's made changes in our community, tremendous changes. Our other guest is Councilman Lauren Taylor. He got up this morning to help us out. He's from Oakland, California. He's District 6. I really want to thank him from the beginning. He's currently in a bid to run for mayor out in Oakland, but he's chose to come on board to help share some of the success stories with Oakland. So we're very, very pleased about this. So today, the question is the goal for this week's program is we want to identify strategies and potential opportunities that might help Toledo reduce the level of violence or homicides in our community. The ultimate question is, what can we as a community do? So let's just get started. I'm going to ask each of you to start with, give us a single program or strategy that you are currently engaged in your professional experience, believe that could help this community. So let's start with Ms. Bankston. You're up first. Ms.
Hi.
Nice sweatshirt, yo.
This is from Grace Community Center. This was a gift, so I thought very appropriate to wear it today. Some activities that I'm engaged in that I think can help. I just get out there and try to do. I've done a number of events. I've done a teen summit with Stacy Judge Cook. I've hosted a pool parties. Really, I just try to reach that between 8 and 11 or 12-year-old age group, because that's where we're losing them at, somewhere between those ages. So I just get out into the community, try to engage with the community centers, bring my skill sets or whatever talents I have to those different places, again, like Grace Community Center, and just offer to be of help, of service.
Okay, so in your case, you try to reach kids before, is that the case?
Yes,
okay.
Yep.
All right. Dr. Myrick, programs that you're engaged in that you may feel that may help us overall in terms of reduction of violence and or homicides. From a director of a juvenile detention center, I think you see about everything. So what are your thoughts?
I do. As director of a facility in Rhode Island, I often get the kids where some people say it's too late. It's never too late when it comes to helping a kid what he needs. But the one piece I want to talk about today is talk about one of our prevention strategies that we do here in Rhode Island. So what it is, it's called a juvenile hearing board. So the short version of this is if a kid does some type of kid infraction, some type of child behavior, rather than arrest and send that kid to be detained, we send that kid to a juvenile hearing board, because that holds the kid accountable. It's a restorative justice approach, but also a wraparound service for the youth and his family. And so that's my prevention piece. So I want to prevent kids from ever coming to me or one of my facilities.
Okay, Dr. Durant, I know you're doing a myriad of things, and thank you for joining us as well. I know you're doing a myriad of things, but what's that one thing that you believe is working more than others, or the one that you might be developing? Good morning to you.
Good morning to you as well. It's a combination on multiple fronts. When you're trying to address these situations, and particularly being in the situation of superintendent, you have the ability to provide more and more opportunity, as well as more and more wraparound care. One of the big aspects to make sure that we have mental health agencies in all of our high schools, as well as the schools itself. So that's around 52 locations. At the same time, providing peer-to-peer mentorship groups such as Young Men of Excellence, Young Women of Excellence, in essence of understanding peer socialization. What the lockdown as well as remote learning has done has created a fragmentation of what the most developed social aspects of early childhood as well as teenage life, the schools themselves. And so really getting involved and hands-on with those opportunities, but more importantly, as well as quarterbacking all the resources within this community. So when we did the press conference in January, bringing 30 plus entities to the table to provide their resources to the school system that is going untouched in traditional everyday as children are coming up. And so obviously you just saw, we just announced the dental care van, which is huge because as a principal, I saw how lack of dental care was impacting and agitating kids. And the minute they had their care taken care of, their behavior was just seamless. So clearly there's a tie in regards to physical health, mental health, that all plays a role on outcomes as well as output of children. So, you know, on multiple fronts, just working with things. I mean, Juwan Army has been a close ally and partnering us with the district. Every Friday, we have a safety meeting, which consists of him along with his distractors, Junction Street Coalition, City Park League, Tina Butts of the movement, as well as TPD and our own SRO officers, really having conversations. It's very interesting how it works is that we now have eyes and ears within the community that lets us know what's happening on social media, what's happening in the community that can end up, you know, getting bigger or show itself at the school door. So just through that process.
Yep. Let me ask you this, Dr. Durant. What is the school system's responsibility in all of this?
Well,
why are you taking such an enormous piece, if you will?
Well, I think us as in the community is an expectation, but more importantly, I hold that expectation of ourselves, meaning that anything that goes on in the community, we want to be a potential solution or the solution to, and then obviously all hands on deck. You know, we try to make sure that these things are happening. So if it's healthcare, let's work to make this happen. If it's opportunities, let's work to make that happen. And if it's even mentorship and male role model guidance, let's work to make those things happen. And so, you know, those are the things in essence of taking as my tenure as well as those who are in alignment with me to really become instrumental in the lives of these children as well as even in these adults. So there's quite a bit of different things that are going on, but you know, I think some of the things that you're seeing that we've been presenting on, such as the Bloomberg Financial Lab, again, you want to end poverty, you got to teach individuals what gets you in poverty, at the same time, how to build personal wealth in order to build community wealth. And it's that community wealth that really rejuvenates, or I should say, reamps, in essence, the Dorr Street corridor. Dorr Street was a happening thing. It was, you know, the New York Strip. And now, how do you revitalize that and become internal investments within the community to understand your wealth, but more importantly, how wealth is gathered through equity and ownership throughout this country?
So, rebuilding community. Another gentleman who's been in the same place doing the same thing, perhaps for a little longer, brings a different view. It's Councilman Taylor. It's 6 a.m. in Oakland, and I thank you, Councilman Taylor, for joining us. You could be doing a lot of things. So talk about the things that Oakland is doing to help violence reduction. And there's a myriad of things. So why don't you share, Councilman Taylor?
Absolutely. Thank you. Good morning and greetings from Oakland. It is a few of the things.
Before we do this, Councilman, I noted in your last interview that you had some connection to this area. You went to Cleveland State, I believe.
I went to Case Western.
Case Western. Oh, yeah. Pardon me, sir. Listen, so you know the area pretty well, and so you do have a connection. So please talk to us about. First, why you engaged Oakland and a couple of programs. We got a couple of minutes, so I want you to be expansive.
Okay, thank you. So yes, I am a third-generation Oaklander whose grandparents moved from Louisiana and Mississippi in the 1940s, so with the Great Migration. Father to Cameron, a daughter who's 12, and Manny, a son who's 8. So what happens in Oakland, particularly around the Black community, is deeply personal to me when we talk about our elders and our next generation. As a former biomedical engineer and a management consultant and bringing real solutions to tough problems, we had to recognize that gun violence is one of the major challenges that we are facing in Oakland that disproportionately impacts our Black community. One of the things in Oakland that we recognize that gun violence is a public health crisis, and that means that it requires a public health approach. So just as we have preventive medicine, we have primary care, we have tertiary care or trauma response. We need to have the different levels of care, support, response when we talk about gun violence. And so we have created a Department of Violence Prevention within the city of Oakland that focuses on the prevention side and pulling together multiple resources that include violence interrupters, those who actually come on the ground engaging the shooters, responding at the bedside to those who are victims to curb the retaliation that often stems, addressing the whole family, because we know that just looking at the one person who's holding the gun, pulling the trigger, is less effective than looking broadly at how you support the entire family. On the primary care side, we are very focused on reimagining what public safety is. We pulled together a task force of around 140 Oaklanders coming together to talk about how we, improve how our public safety system is, recognizing that police are not the only tool in the toolbox, but we have so many others that have to be deployed, from mental health responders, our behavioral health partners, our community hospitals, our parks and recreation centers, and our schools, and how that works. And then the one thing that I'll specifically lift up is that we have deployed the Ceasefire Strategy, our ceasefire program, that recognizes that we've got about 300 with data, about 300 individuals who are responsible for or connected to the majority of the gun violence events and occurrences within the city. So as opposed to having a broad-based approach, being very targeted for those who are more likely to either be involved in or to be victims of gun violence, and really supporting them in shifting their lifestyle through both incentives as well as clarity relative to what the accountability is that exists in how we support them.
So Dr. Durant talked about a lots of wraparound services. Is that how much a part does that play with what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Wraparound services are 100% critical. If we aren't addressing the broader holistic needs of individuals, whether it's their greater economic opportunities, the health challenges that they face and address, creating opportunities for our young people to really find themselves and reach their fuller potential, then we aren't addressing the root causes, and we are simply chasing our tails when it comes to community violence and street violence.
So let me go to Mr. Myrick and Ms. Bankston in that order. Ms. Bankston first, however. Root causes. Have you identified root causes, Ms. Bankston? Let's talk about that for a minute. How do we, please, go right ahead. I think you know the question. Go ahead.
Okay, in my experience and with research and being in the community and working with kids, it's generational tendencies that play a significant part in some of these root causes. So, we can go all the way back to slavery. The Black community has experienced a great deal of trauma. So we have young people who are traumatized. Again, these are sometimes things that are passed on from generation to generation. Their environments are blighted in many cases. They don't have enough opportunities. So many things. It's environmental trauma, and it's things that are passed on through the generations.
So, okay, let me, I'm gonna change the question so we can, after Dr. Myrick's response, root cause, Dr. Myrick, you have a different view. It's after the fact. You talk to these kids, what are they telling you?
They're telling us the stuff that pretty much we already know. One, we talked about a little bit last week. Listen to us. Listen to what we have to say. And I said again, and listening, we don't have to agree with what they say, but we have to listen so that we know how to respond appropriately. That's the one thing. Another thing, we got to love them. But these are our kids. They may be a small part of right now, but they're 100% of the future. So these are our kids. It's up to us to love them. And we need to just continue to look at the investments that we're making in kids, investment in education, investment in neighborhoods, investment in healthcare, investment in community. looking at social determinants of health. We have to make the appropriate investments, and we can't look at kids as a means to an end. Otherwise, we will stay in this circle, and the system will do what it's been designed to do, because the system is working the way it was designed to work. That's one thing that's the elephant in the room that we're not talking about. Until we transform this entire system, then we're going to have the conversation in 2022, 2042, 2092.
Wow. Dr. Durant, and this is questions for everybody, but Dr. Durant, we didn't just get into this circumstance. How did we get here? And did you see this coming as an educator? Could you look from your point of view and see things change? I'm sure you can, but what was it about? How did we get here? That's the question, Dr. Durant.
Well, I mean, I think there's a few fronts, and each of our panelists have really hit on them. But I think, in essence, this foresight had been seen long ago. And Martin Luther King gave one of the most greatest quotes that it gives me goosebumps when I hear it say, "We need to do something different." But he said, "A nation that continued to produce soft-minded men purchased its own spiritual death on an installment plan." Understand what that means. When we allow our males to be disenfranchised in a way, they are the mentors and the bulls in the community that make change a difference. And if they're broken, your communities will become broken. And at the end of the day, when you begin to look at historically who was misleading and misguiding in many of our communities, it's broken men who were ultimately, when you think about in the 60s, they used to run the numbers. Who ended up running the number for adults? Kids. When it got to the 90s, they were running drugs. Who ended up becoming the duffel bag boy running drugs for the men? And then now human trafficking. Who do you think are baiting these young ladies into human trafficking? Our young. And now we're getting to the point, in essence, of when you're talking about hits being put out in the community, these guns are getting in the hands, not through children, but more importantly, adults, in essence, who are misguiding them in certain ways as well, which is why we find the mentorship piece much more heavily needed. But that goes back to that environmental factor that the panelists have spoke about in regards to there are things that exist within the environment that ultimately continue to migrate and spread. And so at the same time, you're dealing with mental health, but the mental health stems from the trauma and the drama that goes on in their everyday reality and home. So when I tell people, in essence, what remote learning had done and the damage of kids is that it kept school at least gave you 6.25 hours, 8 hours to 9 hours a day away from your trauma and your drama. Now you just spent a year and a half exposed day in and day out to whether it's violence, mental abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, whatever that may be, whether it's in the home or whether it's in the community, at the same time, over-exaggerated and getting into the social media aspect that adds the element to it as well. But again, Martin Luther King pointed out long ago and said, we will continue to be on this recycle. We will continue to produce soft-minded men in the way that we are if we continue to allow broken communities to be driven by broken individuals.
I got to stop. I get transfixed when you start speaking. Councilman Taylor, thank you. Councilman Taylor, same question.
Yeah, I can't agree more. It is absolutely critical that we are empowering our young people, and frankly, our young people are growing older. And one of the things that we have found in Oakland is that when you look at the numbers and the data, most of those who are committing gun violence are not our teenagers, but it's those who are in the mid-20s to early 30s, those who are victims and those who are actually pulling the triggers. And in looking at that element, it's important to recognize that our kids don't start off as shooters. There are many signs that we have, many opportunities to catch them along the way and help shape and guide where they go, how those decisions are being made, but we're missing those opportunities. We're not engaging them with those role models, those mentors, those wraparound supports that help to give them the resources they need in order to make alternate decisions. And so it's important to focus on those individual decision points in our young people's lives, in that trajectory that gets them to the point where they are actually holding a gun and potentially pulling a trigger when we talk about addressing gun violence.
So we got to pay bills here. And I was told a few moments ago that we had to take a quick break, but we want to continue this conversation and this track as soon as we get back. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you.
Health. We care for the entire well-being of those we serve, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. That's why we support the efforts of WJUC and the Toledo chapter of the NAACP to help curb violence in our community. At Mercy Health, touching lives invigorates, inspires, and drives us to continue improving the health and well-being of our community, especially those that are underserved. Every day, we continuously look for ways to make life better. We believe this radio summit on violence is important to our entire community. You know, life can sometimes be complex, but working together, we can make the kind of difference in our community that can last for generations. Through hard work, dedication, and education, we know we're building a bright and promising future for our young community. At Mercy Health, we can make our community stronger, safer, and more peaceful. What we do today will help make a better tomorrow for all of us.
There's no better way to help our community than by making a commitment to a child who needs a stable home. Learn how to become a Lucas County Children's Services foster parent. New training classes begin March 18th and run for 2 consecutive weekends. You'll learn about the need and the difference you can make for a child. Register by calling 419-213-3336 or at lucaskids.net. Become a Lucas County foster parent.
The reason why you can't hear me is because we're moving. We got a lot of things going on here. So I'd like to continue with, to pick up with Ms. Banks and Dr. Meyer to respond to this question as well. In terms of the question was, how do we get here? Ms. Banks, and you first.
As I said earlier, these are issues that have been perpetuated and passed on generation to generation, and there's a great deal of trauma. So what we see now in our young people, they are taught certain behaviors, but they're also traumatized by their environments. If you grow up seeing people go to jail, hearing gunshots, seeing the police, all these social issues that we have, yes, our young people are going to be very angry, very numb to violence because their environment, their entire world has basically said, you have no value.
Yeah. Dr. Meyer.
Okay, I was taking off mute. I didn't realize that. Normally, I'm speaking on mute. So thanks to you and your team for doing that.
Yep.
Well, one of the things is, I mean, it's easy to blame the pandemic. It's easy to blame social media, and it's easy to blame television. But I think the one of the issues is there's twofold. The first piece is I'm gonna blame us as a people for one thing, because what are we actually doing? And obviously I'm speaking to the choir here, but I think we can and we must do more. We can't look for someone externally to come take care of our communities. I think that's a problem that we have been doing in our communities for too long. And so I think we need to change that trajectory, because they've shown us that they're not really going to invest in our communities, not invest in us. We'll get more money for police officers. I'm not against the police, but I'm just saying we get more money for police officers. We may get a new library here and there, but and Dr. Durant's on the line. How much time are you? Imagine if people would really invest more into the school system to give you more programming, newer books, newer buildings, newer this, newer that. Imagine if we had newer hospitals in our facilities that cater to us. Imagine we had a thriving grocery store, not just McDonald's everywhere. Not saying anything against the McDonald's, but just like that. If we have boys and girls, I think me and Shay talked about that last week. About I had the Douglas Center as a kid. How much are we really investing into the Douglas Center to renovate it to make it look like 2022? Again, I'm not knocking. I haven't been there in a while, but last time I was there, it didn't really look 2022-ish. So until we can get those investments on our end and all those fronts in healthcare and education, and making sure there are jobs in our communities, and making sure that the communities are places people feel safe at and want to be at. So that's something that we need to, it can be done a lot.
Yeah, so I just don't want to have a conversation today and then we walk away and nothing changes. In a conversation I had with Councilman Taylor, I'm going to start with Councilman Taylor and then go to Dr. Durant. The conversation now to all of you is reimagining community. Councilman Taylor.
Thank you for that. So honestly, when I look at this, I look at a lot of what we're talking about is that hurt people hurt people. And when you talk about, and I love what Mr. Myrick said at the beginning, that our young people are wanting to be heard, they're wanting to be listened to, and they're wanting to be loved. And we know that love people, and people who have been healed often attempt to create that healing around them. And so when engaged in the right way. And that's when we talk about building and strengthening community, that's what we have to get back to is really engaging. There are many who are listening to this podcast right now who are not connected to the violence that's happening on the streets. And they're trying to figure out, well, what can I do? How can I engage? Show up to be a mentor through one of the programs that we're talking about. There are ways of engaging, or at least even just acknowledging folks when you pass them in the streets, letting folks know that they are valued, listening when you have those opportunities. That recreating the community, recreating the family, recreating the connectivity between people is what clearly is needed when we talk about giving people that self-worth and helping them realize that lives are that much more valuable than maybe they have treated them or, I will say, interacted with folks previously.
Dr. Durant. Muted. He's muted. There we go.
Yep. In essence, in regards to really continue to provide many of the resources that go untapped and many times in our communities. I mean, I could think of one right now is chiropractic. I mean, something that I'd never been exposed to and thought was like a magic trick until one day as an adult, when I did it, I realized this stuff works, but it never existed in my community. So it's something that we didn't embrace, something that I didn't embrace coming from the East Side. So, I think it's certain things to that. But when you talk about rebuilding the community, you really have to go back to our formula that we were doing at one point in time. Tulsa, Oklahoma had the first Black Wall Street. Understand what they did. A gentleman who had wealth bought land, and he separated that land to bring others on board to cultivate and create a community. Before you knew it, they had developed their own financial situation where they were reinvesting in their pharmacy, reinvesting in their grocery store. They were providing the means for themselves. They provided the police officers. They provided their own means until the day of their massacre. So again, they were on to something in regards to what they were doing. So when you talk about, and that's one of the things why we brought the Bloomberg Financial Lab, is we want to understand kids coming up how to understand, develop financial wealth, where you cannot work for money for the rest of your life. You have to make money work for you. And when it works for you, it works for your family. And when you invest into the community and the churches, they begin to broaden themselves within itself. So when the panelists said bring new things, we have an opportunity to bring these new things into our area if we take advantage of many of the opportunities. And that's what it is in regard to opportunity, understanding financials and understanding trades and stocks and such things that we weren't exposed to, something I had to educate myself to in that aspect. But when I see Tulsa, Oklahoma, it's inspiring to be able to see how one person started launching multiple things that developed a colony and a group, but more importantly, a community that truly had wealth among all their families, but more importantly, cultural wealth within themselves. So these are just strategies that had once existed, for whatever reason, we have never gotten back to. So when Dorr Street burns down, where are we at in restoring Dorr Street in a way that it once lived? Well, there's ability to invest in there because there's a lot of land within that opportunity stretching from your location all the way down past King. And as you get all the way down to the universities, there's an opportunity really to make things happen within our own community, but it has to have a sense of financial wealth. But more importantly, how do you invest in yourself, which is your best investment? But more importantly, how do you find someone else to invest in you so you're not taking the money of your own to be able to build your own wealth? So these are just various strategies, but more importantly, getting our kids to think differently. And that happens through those mentorships that the panelists spoke about. And that's why in Young Men of Excellence, Young Women of Excellence, I get to each group and I start talking about financial wealth, talk about workforce development, pathways, all these other things. But more importantly, how to deal with some of the trauma in our house. So the young man raised his hand the other day and said, my mom's hooked on heroin. What should I do? Caught me off guard. But the one thing he said was, let's one, talk about resources that can help your mother, but two, let's get you trained in Narcan and other things, because one day you may have to save her that she finds a relapse within your home. And so we had to provide these parameters, but he says this out loud with his peers because he became comfortable in regard to sharing. And those are the brotherhoods and sisterhoods that we provide young men of excellence, young women of excellence. And if anybody, like I say, that's listening, that wants to get involved, we need mentors at each one of these schools that help guide as part of the young men and women of excellence.
So we're going to get all these numbers. We're going to get a number for you so people can, if we're going to change, comes from us. And I want the information to go. I do not want this to be another radio program and nothing happens. Ms. Bankston, reimagining community, redeveloping people. We need to do that. What's your thoughts?
I think that everything that everyone else said is true, but the system also has to change as well. Systematically, there have to be jobs. Systematically, there has to be a grocery store with healthy and nutritious meals. Systematically, our kids deserve to get tutors and iPads and everything else that more affluent schools are getting. It takes money to get out of poverty. You know, people ask, what does it take? You know, it takes money. It takes opportunity. And unfortunately, our kids don't see that directly in their immediate community or in their surroundings.
Yeah, Dr. Merritt, thank you. Dr. Merritt.
Can I just say what she said? Because she always gets the best answers.
Yeah, you can.
No, I'm going to try not to repeat what she said. One thing I want to say, Dr. Durant, keep doing the work that you're doing. Before we started this, I told Dr. Durant I've been following him for many years, and I just love the work that he's doing with TPS schools. So I want to just publicly say that while we're on the radio, because I've been listening to what you said. So obviously, Shay, the same with you, my friend, all the work that you've been doing, whether it's on the social work side or
okay, enough politics. Enough politics.
Thank my friends, but go what they said: exposure, access, inspiration, hope, opportunity. But we also, those are things that you need, and one, because we all want the same things. We also need to make sure they have finances to take care of themselves. You know, because a lot of times we want to put kids in these programs, but kids need money. You know, sometimes they don't have money for stuff. They also need to make sure we got the time to do things and the time for themselves. And lastly, they need to enjoy what they do. So a lot of times we place kids into these situations where we don't give them money, they don't have enough time, or it's not fun, and they want them to just thrive in it. It's not going to work.
Exactly.
So the councilman, they're talking dollars now. What's been your experience? We can't wave a magic wand. How does this work?
Absolutely. That's the dollars are absolutely where it's at, because we have to create those investments, those opportunities that really do create and expand value. For me, it has been great to see a number of programs that we've been implementing actually take off in a way that really addresses equity. We have a Department of Race and Equity in the city of Oakland, and that department has helped us to create a strategy whereby we allocate dollars and incorporate lack of investment into the criteria of where we invest in the future, so that those areas, parts of the city, those communities that have been disinvested, underinvested, are actually getting a disproportionately higher share of some of our budget allocations to address those inequities and help level the playing field. I think that's one thing when you talk about the systematic change, how we allocate dollars, how we distribute resources. It's also important as we're creating opportunities to recognize that our communities have the core skills, knowledge, insight, ideas that they need, but have been lacking access to capital, access to some of these sort of resources that allow them to expand. I'm proud that we were able to pull together and work with our state senators to identify $8 million coming to East Oakland, the part of Oakland that is historically redlined, Black and brown, and really providing a revolving loan fund for Black and brown entrepreneurs that allows that access to capital. So they're not just getting knowledge on how to build a business or what that is like, but actually seeding those investments, giving them not just the mentorship support or advice, but actually giving them that confidence of someone investing in them, their idea, and their potential.
So I have to follow up, just one brief follow up. That process, difficult? Was that to walk that through?
Yes. I mean, nothing through, the political process is easy. But what I'll say is in organizing a number of supporters from the community, those broadly, we were able to, I will say, push where, obstacles, roadblocks often come up. And so getting that broad base of support is absolutely critical. I think we also were able to take advantage of some of the budget surplus that came in recently as well. So, where preparation meets opportunity head on.
Dr. Durrett, you've been successful on a number of levels, reaching kids, finding resources, and as Dr. Myrick talked about, your energy level is incredible. Are you meeting needs in TPS right now, Dr. Durrett, in terms of meeting the needs for these kids? What's out there? That's a pretty hefty load you're carrying over there. Can you speak to that?
Yes, I mean, I think the panelists have really touched on it all too well, and everything they have stated are the things that as we communicate with kids and families, we come across and we provide a means to it. So in other words, when you talk about, in essence, of resources such as technology, in regard to one, being able to be remote, one, we had identified that a lot of homes don't have computers, so we had to get that in their hands. So we are 100% one-to-one. Then we had a lot of people who didn't have Wi-Fi. We had to get that into their hands. And then we realized that they had 5 members in the household competing Wi-Fi, so we had to put a second Wi-Fi in some of these routers in some of these homes and so forth. And so continue with that barrier. But at the same time, in our career tech pathways, so we have around 7, we have 6 magnet high schools, which are thematic high schools focused on careers. But at the same time, our career tech program, what we began to realize in communication, it requires driver's license. Our kids aren't in the mean to have driver's license because many of them aren't going to be able to afford driver's ed the way we used to just inherently pay $15 to do it. It's no longer subsidized in the state of Ohio. That means the child had to do it themselves. So there's a barrier within that. So we had to create means that if you're in a career tech program, you ultimately will have the ability to get driver's ed and driver's license to prepare for your internship as well as others. So you can't go into police, you can't go into fire, you can't get a pre-apprenticeship if you don't have driver's license. So again, when you begin to assess all these barriers, kind of the same way with the financial lab, Dr. Randy gave financial lab, what are they going to invest with? One, there's a simulated model, but 2, we've had developed funding account for the kid to go ahead and use real money to invest. But again, these are things that you have to continuously think out, internalize as well as begin to implement in regard to providing all the barriers within that. So again, when you talk about wraparound care, it's more than just physical, mental. It's about other things in regards to the environmental space as well that these kids need, in essence, that you may not think about that at the end of the day come to fruition that keeps them from getting to a certain opportunity.
So thank you, Mr. Banks and Mr. Myrick. So is this a political question? I mean, if this has always been here, why haven't we been able to save more lives, be better at this? Is this a cultural? What is it? Who wants? Dr. Mark, you want to go first?
I'll go first. Pretty much because it hasn't been important to the people with power, the people with the purse strings. That's the reason why, because it wasn't them or wasn't their kids or wasn't their communities. And so now that we're not waiting on others to come in and do this for us, and now they're looking like, oh shoot, what are we gonna do? We can either, because it doesn't look good to say that's not our problem anymore, and God forbid you have a panel of 7 African American folks talking about their community, what they're gonna do. We've seen this before. It's also Black Wall Street. We don't want that either. So we want, how can we control this? And we got to ask ourselves, Dr. Durant talked about the barriers there. How are we, and right now is a good time financially for the world, pretty much, especially the U.S., but how are we going to sustain this after this? How are we going to make sure we keep the funds? How are we going to keep the momentum? How are we going to keep doing everything that we've done? Because when we get austere, the first thing to go is our programs, is our stuff. So I'll turn to say, because I have a lot more to say, but I know we're on the radio, so.
Yeah, thank you. And Ms. Bankston, your response?
Can you ask me the question again, please?
Well, simply, the fact is that is this problem, we've identified the problem and that we knew it all the time. Why hasn't there been a response? Why are we at this point just talking about the need? And I would actually say is the conversation sufficient to get us to where we need to be? What's taking us the other side of this question? Flip the coin. Why are we in this position, basically?
I have two. Well, this is kind of a two-part answer. So, at the community level, the residents of places, I think that people are beat down. People are tired. You know, you talk about Tulsa in different examples, even Door Street, of when the Black community thrived. But what was the outcome? People, you know, got murdered. People got killed. Properties got stolen from, and the Black community, African American people, have watched these things happen, you know, again, generation after generation after generation. I think people are beat down. People are tired and people are afraid. People are scared to speak out on issues that should be challenged because they know what the outcome is going to be based on history. And in terms of the leadership, we have to get out of this crab in a barrel mentality of being focused on, is that person making $1 or is that person making a quarter? And we have to work together. If we don't, based on my research and what I've read and calculations, the Black community will be extinct within a short amount of time. We have to do it differently.
Okay, so what we want to do is that I see thank you. That's really incredible response, first of all. You know, I knew there was a reason why we should invite you back. Well done. Well done.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well done. Mr. Juwan Armour joins us, and you join us in a time, in a moment where it's pretty important. We talk about community violence intervention. Now, Time Magazine wrote about this a few years ago, and they identified those things: the intergenerational poverty, violence, and trauma. Mr. Armour, you're running a program right now, and that really speaks to trying to basically save lives. So my question to you very, very simply is, do you actually, what's going on with your program? Let's just say that, Mr. Armour.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Smith. I appreciate it. To all the panelists, I thank you guys for being here as well. Forgive my
apologies. Good morning. Next time,
I was double booked. I told you. Hey, y'all know last week I was on here. I was in Jamaica, beautiful weather. You know, when you first get back,
you didn't want to come back, okay?
Yeah, but when you get back, it's a lot of catching up to do, and so
yes, sir.
Sir. So I appreciate.
But thank you for joining us. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Yeah, so what we're currently doing is developing partnerships. Dr. Durant, one of our partnerships, while I have Dr. Durant on, which I've known Dr. Durant since high school, and he's been consistent in who he is and the services that he's able to provide for our kids. And I'm extremely proud and thankful that he's in his position. But one of our partnerships, we extended out our volunteer campaign that we had this summer. Once parks and pools were open, we had 6 incidents, 3 with firearms, 3 with fights. When our community volunteers, those individuals from the community that have found passion in other things such as Motorcycle Club, our Black Greeks from the University of Toledo, the Masons, Kappa. And so having individuals that come from the community and look like the kids that are in those community, being available to them has been exciting experience because we've been able to see that. From that experience, we've had zero incidents from our summer campaign after having those 6 at any parks and pools that we canvassed. And so we kind of, Dr. Durant seen the value in that. And so now we are available outside of schools. When they do weapons checks in the schools, we're available outside of schools. And the response, and the thing about it is that it's the response from the parents and the kids that see us when they engage with us, that they're excited that we're out there. They're excited that something's being done. They're excited that there's some kind of effort from individuals from the community to be present and available. So that's one of the things. But on other notes, as far as our social emotional learning curriculum, we're in 4 after-school programs. We are in 3 YMCAs. We are in 3 junior highs throughout the city of Toledo, Robinson, McTide, and Jefferson and Washington local. So just being able to expand that reach and being able to build partnerships in the community in a collaborative effort has definitely provided some beneficial rewards for us.
I hopefully you can hear me. I want to make sure that I ask about Oakland's specifics about Oakland's program. That's one of the reasons why we invite. You said, first of all, you did say, and you should let Councilman know that you studied him. Why don't you do that now?
Yeah, thank you. And that was the main reason I wanted to jump on this call. Oakland was one of the case studies that when I first took the position, before I even got back to Toledo, and researching the progress they've made. You know, in 2000, I believe it was early 2000, when Oakland was in top 3 of homicides in the country.
Yep.
And I don't want to speak, I don't want to be wrong, Councilman. I believe you guys are around 20 or something like that now.
Unfortunately,
go right ahead.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, unfortunately, we have seen a slight regression from the gains that we made due to the pandemic. But yes, we are pleased with the work that had happened up to 2018 and how we have drawn down relative to gun violence when you look at our ceasefire program, the ceasefire strategy in Oakland. And I did want to address how do you create the change that is sustained and stays? You've got to have the partnership between the community organizations, the mobilization on the ground, those partners, and that are working on the outside, and those on the inside who are in touch with, connected to, rooted in community, and changing the structures and the systems that are in place. In Oakland, we have our Oakland Fund for Children and Youth that is a ballot measure that ensured that 3% of our general fund revenue is dedicated to children and family serving sort of programs, services, operations. And in that way, it creates that sustained investment over time that regardless of who's in power, in the seat of power, that there will be that commitment. And so I did want to just appreciate you lifting up the different programs. There's that. There's creating these departments that I talked about, our Department of Violence Prevention, our Department of Race and Equity, that focuses on how we mobilize the different, I will say, cogs in the system in a way that's oriented towards addressing the core problems, the challenges that plague our community. So it's that active, engaged community along with the rooted leaders that are inside of the system working to create the initial as well as the sustained change that I think goes well. And so that's why I feel positive about us rebounding from this sort of regression that I talk about in gun violence that we've seen through the pandemic, because we have been there before. We know what it takes, and we are mobilized, organized in order to make sure that we continue to not only address gun violence, but these other opportunities, challenges that we talk about, from economic development to the mental health and well-being of our community.
Let me just ask you a follow-up question, Councilman. What was the, what did it take to get, and how did you get all these organizations under one umbrella? How did you get all the people in the community, you know, agreeing to agree or disagree, but keep moving forward? What's the secret?
Yeah, I don't want to belie the fact. I don't want to pretend as though everyone's under one umbrella and everything is always perfect, because, you know, our community and others, it is not an easy task. But the key is to identify those things that we are aligned on and make sure that we, at least for those initiatives, those outcomes that we are driving, that we do have a process of at least respect and conversation. There are times when we are going to disagree about one element of a solution or implementation or what have you, but staying focused on that North Star, which we all agree where we want to be. We want to create that place where our young people do feel loved, where our elders are respected and supported, where there is that community that we have talked about, and that sense of connection to where everybody is valued. The question is, how can we find areas, small areas of alignment that allow us to build the trust to get to bigger areas of alignment and opportunity to work together and partner?
Okay. All right. I've been reminded that. Thank you all. I've been reminded that we went out and talked to one mom who lost her son. Her name is Miss Brandy Hopkins. We have a video. We tried to go video on this, so we'll do this and we'll come right back after this one. Unfortunately, that video is not writing, so I'm very, very comfortable with continuing the conversation. So the conversation then becomes to you, Dr. Durant, um, under one umbrella. I think everybody in this Zoom room starts smiling when you say under one umbrella. Is it possible? What can we in Toledo do, Dr. Durant? Your leadership has been enormous.
You know what
Go right ahead.
I mean, yep. No, I think in essence of really continuing to have the right conversations at the same time, heavily getting involved and invested into other organizations other than our own. So the prime example when people say, Dr. Durant, you know, you guys were able to get these things paid for by other entities and things such as that. And how are you leveraging the private entities, public entities to do and help offset some of these things that we didn't have the means to afford? And it happens through relationships, but more importantly, intentional relationships. So the individuals we called together to have 30 plus agencies, because at some point in time and involvement, supporting them, but more importantly, getting ourselves active on their board. So I make it a point to sit on 10 and 12 boards every year and make sure that when decisions are made, I'm part of the discussion and bringing our kids along in those discussions, whether it's Boys and Girl Club, YMCA, United Way, the Frederick Douglass Center, all these different organizations need our presence, our voice, in essence of supporting them in ways that has went blighted for a while. But again, like I tell people at the end of the day, the relationships would build the opportunity when you need solutions. You have an ability to go back to them. You know, you saw many of the faith-based community from Pastor Perriman and others. Why? Because I've been out to every one of their churches. I've been over 260 churches, got in the pulpit and spoke with them. You know, and at the end of the day, to pick up the phone and call Pastor Perriman or to call a Bishop Culp or Bishop Gordon and so forth, they are there to jump in for the fact they realize, hey, you want to jump in with us and we want to jump within you. And I think those are the things that continue to build trust among organizations, say, no, you're not here to usurp our power. We want to have our own power. No, I want you to be in alignment with us so we can work together to resolve these issues and opposed to just doing it in isolation.
Yeah, so I want to ask Ms. Banks a different kind of question. Both you and Councilman Taylor are dead on that up higher level, but Ms. Banks, I don't know if the kids are really hearing us when we say, you know, here you go with a new pair of shoes. What are they really looking for? What are these kids looking for, Ms. Banks?
They're looking for consistency. So we can say, here you go, a new pair of shoes. I've done it. We can say, here you go, here's a haircut. But again, they go right back into those environments, in many cases, toxic environments, and that's not enough. We have to invest, like other people have said, into our communities where when we are able to give that pair of shoes, we can also teach that kid how he can get or she can get their own shoes and go back into their communities, and that can become a reality. But there's no point in us teaching and saying the things that have historically been said when they go back home, they don't have any opportunity.
Yep. Hey, Mr. Harmon, you know that well, don't you?
Man, absolutely. And Ms. Bankson is...
You're muted. You're muted. You're muted, Mr. Armour.
I'm good.
Now you are.
Ms. Bankson was right on and what she was echoing regarding what Dr. Durant spoke about. But what also encourage what Dr. Durant does to create that consistency, he provide a platform for accountability. So when we have these programs, we have these partnerships, and we're under one umbrella, we also then have a weekly meeting to address how the previous week went, what was not done, why was that not done, where was the ball dropped, and how we can improve. But having platform very similar to what the councilman said in Oakland, they created departments to not just say that, not just to preach, but to make sure that individuals were doing what they said they were going to be doing. Because again, echoing what Ms. Bankston said, it goes back to accountability. It goes back to consistency. Because kids, they see the fate coming a mile away. They know when you're not intentional. They know when you're not going to be there the next day. And so just providing opportunities to be accountable, and especially working in city government, is very difficult. But having platforms and having Dr. Durant, having Pastor Perryman provide opportunities to make sure that we are accountable to the community is huge. And that's what's going to create the consistency once individuals start being accountable for what they say they're going to do.
Let me just ask you this. I've been meaning to ask you this, Mr. Armour. Did you know the parameters? You've been writing there were job parameters, but did you really know what this job was going to be?
I did. So I'm glad you asked me that question. I'm so glad you asked me that question, because when I accepted the position, I was administrator in Columbus, at a charter school in Columbus. But I know how funding works. I know how government and politics work. I know if they say they're going to try initiative and it is not successful, they'll say, well, we tried, and they'll go another direction. But having the flexibility to relocate back to Toledo, to get an apartment where I can be there Monday morning through Saturday afternoon, I can dedicate 10, 11 hours to the position. My kids, I have a son who is a freshman at Kent State. My daughter's in the 6th grade, and I could commit a year with their permission, their blessing. I could commit a year, 2 years to this project, whatever's necessary to create, to show that change is possible, right? Because when we echo numbers, they're going to echo homicide numbers. They're going to echo all the things that aren't going to be done, but they're not going to celebrate the successes. Because when you celebrate successes, it encourages the continuation of those programs, right? And so with that, we've had success that hasn't been seen since 2017. You have to go back 5 years to see numbers as low as we've seen in Junction and Inglewood in homicides, total crime, and violent crime. All 3 categories. You have to go back to 2017 to see numbers this low. And so I know the commitment that it took to create change. I know the partnerships that it took. I've been knowing Ron. I'm sorry, Dr. Durant. I've been knowing Ron since high school. He is our superintendent. He's an awesome leader. The faith-based community. Most of those pastors, I've been in their churches because my mom grew up in the church. The individuals in the community, which has been one of the main causes that I see in the trajectory regarding young people who choose violence. We were protected when I was growing up. The same community that these kids where Junction Inglewood, the community that we were in that had the highest homicide rate in Toledo, now has the lowest. Those individuals, that's my community. My mother still lives there. And so when I was growing up, older guys that were in the streets, they protected young people. Kids were safe for the most part. Women were safe for the most part. Now there are no rules. Kids can be violated easily or more easily than any other demographic of people. And so with that culture has changed, but having relationships with individuals from that culture, I think the voice can speak a little bit louder.
So I want to stay with you, but I got to stay in particular, pay attention to time. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. Dr. Myrick, you see kids probably at their lowest point. We're talking about reimagining community. How do we rebuild kids? What do you think, director of a juvenile facility? How do you help to rebuild a child's life?
Well, first you give him or her love. That's the first thing they need. First, second, and third things. You also give kids attention. Think about when we're babies, we cry because we need attention. There's something wrong. What is it? Is it attention? Is it a food? Am I wet? We need to give time. We need to give love. We need to give them time. We need to give them attention. We need to let the kid know that you're safe here. This is your safe zone. We need to give them a sense of family, a sense of community, where they can think about it. When you give a kid love, he shows love back. And kids don't love who they hurt. And they love the community. They love you. They're not going to hurt you. They're going to work it up.
So here's a question for everyone. If you were to write a strategy to save these babies, what would your first step be? I'm going with Miss Bankston because when she gets started, I get so good. I'm gonna start with Miss Bankston, then I'm gonna tap Councilman, and then Dr. Durant. If you were to write a strategy to save these babies, what would your first step be? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
My first step would be to do a better job at focusing on the mothers, the grandmothers, the aunts. Historically, Black women have held the Black family up for a number of reasons. And we need to do a better job at maybe tapping into their energy, and let's see, how do they feel? What have been their experiences? What are their needs? Because the people that are shooting it are also sons and daughters, and, you know, maybe have a different level of empathy if the lesson that we're trying to teach is coming from the mother or the grandmother. And I don't think we've done a very good job at focusing on that. That would be my first step.
Okay. Councilman Taylor, you've done this, so, you know, you could pull a myriad of thank you, Ms. Banks. You could pull a myriad of things out, but first step, strategy so we can save these babies. Councilman.
Yeah, I think the first step is to show up and be consistent in authentic engagement. When we are talking about the decision points that people have in their life, they are not going to listen to folks who they don't believe have their best interests at heart, who have been there and consistent. And so we've got to show up. If we don't have those relationships supporting those who do, I think that sort of dovetails with what Ms. Bankston shared. They're going to listen to their mama, their grandmother, and those who have been. They're going to listen to, you know, those in the community that they have seen every day and they feel have respected them, have love for them, and want to see them genuinely do better. And so until we have that credibility, we have to work with the frontline healers, those on the ground, and simply be consistent ourselves so that we can earn that and build that. And then that same consistency translates to building those structures in government, in the system, in our community that last beyond individual and his or her efforts.
So thank you. With Dr. Durant, same question. Then we go on to Mr. Armour, same question.
You know what? Just as the panel has stated, I'm in complete agreement with them in regard to consistency and presence. I can tell you that there is no greater indicator to my success than my father's presence. No greater indicator. Because if my father wasn't there, I wouldn't be here today. The aggression that I carry within me would have been negative than necessarily positive if no one was able to get in and ultimately control me in a way that was positive. And so when I think of my father, one of the things I tell people were his key ingredients, because my father came from nothing, former gang member from New York, been shot, tattoos on his face, etc. And at the end of the day, raised 3 successful children, despite not having success in essence of working and other things such as that. But more importantly, he had ultimately became a change agent